Yeah, at this point I don't know. I'm trying to stream again, and I don't know what to do differently. And this is like I didn't change anything in the streaming app, like the Flash Media Encoder.
Right.
It's still not showing up for you guys, right?
No, it's live.
Oh, we are live?
You are live.
Oh, here we are. Finally loading video. Man, that was actually I pressed it like 40 seconds ago, seriously. So we're on a huge delay, I think. Nathan, are you getting audio? Oh, I'm getting advertisement. Well, I don't know.
We're getting audio. We're getting audio.
Okay,
I just checked.
Cool. We may not have waited long enough before, but that was a crazy delay. That was seriously like pushing a minute between me hitting the button and the stream going live. And we kept thinking that it was something wrong on our end, but maybe it was just a very, very long delay for the stream to come up. So, hi everyone. We're finally here, I think. Hopefully you can hear me and Vasae and the music. If someone can verify that we finally got stuff right. Nathan says we're good to go. All right.
I don't hear music. Oh yeah, you said without music. Never mind.
Well,
but yes,
actually, we should have music now. I can turn it up a little bit to see if it's.
Don't tempt fate, Baker.
By changing anything? Oh, this is just a volume slider in iTunes.
Let's just roll with this. I think I might be able to do some workarounds for your audio here in the next week.
Basically, yeah. Like first thing next week, we need to do some tests and see if we can figure out something better.
Yeah, I'll try to wake up before 11 o'clock in the morning.
All right, so I guess we should do introductions, do our usual show opener. It would be cool if we could have like a logo flying around on the on the stream or something at some point. But anyway, I'm Ryan. I am one of the artists and sort of design director of sorts here at Pixelscopic. We're going to be streaming about Delver's Drop only 20 minutes later than we were supposed to, so sorry for the technical difficulties. Had everything from audio problems, a headset dying, and the stream just not going live when I press the button, even though I've done it the same way every single time. So anyway, we'll do better next time. But Vasae, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Vasae. I'm a streamer and YouTuber, and I'm here to answer your questions and pose them to Baker.
And you can probably see Nathan in the background, but he won't be on the feed this time. He said that I guess talking and drawing are too distracting or something if done at the same time. So anyway, I guess I should pull a file up and start working on something here. Based on what people were saying on the forums, Voss, what do you think that I should work on?
No, the dead tie between classes and enemies. So
really?
What are you most in? Yeah, two votes and 2 votes. So if you guys...
All right, people, show up on our forums and vote next time, because a tie of 2 versus 2 is that's just pretty slim pickings there.
So if you guys want involved in the voting, I put a link in the chat so you guys can go and vote and discuss. So go and do that. Discussion is good, and feedback is always appreciated. So whatever you feel most comfortable doing, Baker, I think we should stick with that.
Yeah, what I was kind of thinking about doing is pulling up my giant enemies list and coming up with something interesting to do for future zones, because I'm kind of sick of looking at the bats.
All 9 versions of them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Gotta love it. But that's how you make a video game.
Fill it with bats. The old tried and true.
Yeah, fill it with bats and just palette swap. That's how you do it, right? That's the Rogue Legacy way.
Yeah, at least we haven't done any palette swaps yet. We probably should have. It would have saved some time. But we said, no, we're going to try not to. But now you know why, or at least we know why every video game ever has done it. Because you're always, 10 million years behind. So pulling up my Giant enemy sheet.
Doom wants to see cultists, to the surprise of no one. Yeah.
Okay, we could do that. I mean, I was working on a template a while back for basically any characters other than the Delvers so they could all use a consistent skeleton. So instead of, I guess, doing palette swaps, we were going to do texture swaps to some degree. So let me find them in the list. They're in here somewhere. So just so you know, I'm scrolling through my list of crazy things here to find, because I can't remember if they wouldn't be under NPCs.
How's my audio sound? Is it cutting out a little bit? I need a new mic.
Let me see if I can turn you up a little bit. Looks like I might have you turned up as much as I can on my end.
Okay, maybe turning me down will be a little better. I'm seeing a little bit of spike.
I can turn down the music a little bit and maybe turn myself down a little bit.
I think you sound fine. Low bro says it's good. Okay, just, okay. Making sure. I get paranoid with audio quality and stuff like that, so.
Yeah. So I'm going to open up this old master enemy sheet because it gives me a sense of scale versus other enemies and everything. So we'll delete some stuff out of this, or I'll just work.
Seeing humanoid enemies sound like a good plan. Do you still have the file for the guard that you made a while back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll probably port it into that file, but this is my big file where I sketch a bunch of different ideas, so I can kind of refer to... it's something I've been talking to the guys around the office about. Just like, I like to make gigantic, 10,000 pixel files with just like a mess of sketches, and then I can find things to like recombine or contrast. So it's like, oh, those two enemies look a little too similar. Like I'll put them next to each other and figure out what I can change on one or the other to make them look less similar. So anyway, for people who don't know, the Cultists are it's basically a group that I guess we don't want to spoil too much, but they live somewhere in the drop on a particular level or multiple levels, and they've basically been infected by kind of merc radiation poisoning, and they're sort of caught between life and death. Like they're basically like the lowest level ones are kind of zombie-ish, I guess. Like they don't have much of a mind left, and the higher level ones worship the merc and want to basically absolve themselves or dissolve themselves by sort of jumping into the merc. So there's going to be some commonality or some similarity between the Undelvers and kind of what they are, and these the Cultists, where I mean basically they have a similar kind of degeneration, but but they end up sort of doing different things or having different levels of consciousness or kind of different purposes. So like the Delvers, when they become undead and turn into these skeleton creatures, like basically they're it's kind of like the highest goals they had in life kind of become, well, they sort of go crazy about them. So kind of like, when someone, the idea of ghosts being the spirits of people who left something undone, that's kind of what the Undelvers would be, but they're kind of crazed, so they'll try to kill anyone who kind of stands in their way or seems to be like competing with them.
They're like revenants.
Revenants in what?
A revenant is a type of undead, at least in a lot of fiction, that is animated by whatever that series is undead energy is, and they are still alive to fulfill a purpose, and then once that purpose is done, they fall into a shambles and pass on.
Yeah.
So it's like a physical angry ghost.
Yeah.
That's what they seem to me to be.
I kind of want the lowest level cultists to look kind of goofy, and actually I probably need to make them a little more human, like a little more like the Delver in proportion.
So you broached worship a little bit. Can we spend some time on the divinities in Delver's Drop? Do you think that'd be too spoilery? I think I was up until 5 o'clock in the morning talking about them. They're actually kind of heavy on my mind.
Was that you and Doom?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this was the last night thing?
Yeah, well, yeah.
The last 5 nights?
It's a topic that we talk about.
Well, sure. I mean, I think talking about the highest level deities isn't really that much of a spoiler because, as will probably come up, they aren't super actively involved with humanity at this point in history. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll really be too spoilery.
There's also some stuff about them on the forums, so
yeah,
I don't know how much of that is still in the works from what we've talked about, but so if you go to the forums, there's a thread about the things that are called the Pilar, and they're these. I guess they're the universal constants like gravity. I should probably pull up that list just in case we need to talk about them by name.
Yeah, they're sort of like the universal principles of basically the principles that guide all change or stability. So they aren't like, tied to a specific element, and I mean, I think even gravity to some degree is maybe a little bit specific. There would be one that governs all forms of attraction, for instance, like or all forms of kind of repulsion, and the first one, the Primus, basically just governs or sort of exists to define like basically distinctness between one thing and another. Like basically his sort of principle, and I call him a him even though they're kind of genderless, but his principle was necessary for things to not just be like a giant amalgam of primordial soup. So they sort of define reality the way we understand like matter and energy and so on.
Right. Gravity seems more a thing that Grimm would do,
mm-hmm.
and that gets into another of the, I guess, what you'd call divinities. I hesitate to call them gods. That was a sticking point. Because the Pilar and the temperaments aren't quite gods in a classical sense. They don't have will, or the Pilar do, but the temperaments don't.
Yeah. Well, I guess like that. Maybe that's a good place to kind of start off. Is well, even though I guess this is a good way to kind of run this stream. Like I'm drawing some random baddie, but we're actually talking about something barely related. But that's fine. There's not much to say about the cultists really, anyway.
Yeah, that's why I broached the subject. I thought we should have something going on.
But yeah, so the pillars or pilars, I've never really decided how I would prefer it to be pronounced anyway. But so they they have purpose. So it's kind of, I guess I've tried to, in defining the characters and universe and everything, I've tried to actually differentiate between beings that have completely free will and beings that have purpose and can make choices. But basically, like, as humans, we have free will and we can have purpose to greater or lesser degrees, but we can change our purpose. We can and we can use free will to change our purpose or change our goals in life, or even for a given day. But the pillars or pilars, which sounds kind of cooler, they they have purpose to like the extreme. So basically, their whole existence is to fulfill a purpose. And if they didn't, like, they would basically cease to exist because they're so bound up in it. Not that that could or would happen, but just like, so, the Primus' whole purpose is to define reality and define like the distinction between one thing and another. And he kind of can't change his mind and stop doing that, where a human being could. Like, if a human has a job, they can decide not to show up to that job. So all of the Primus' choices, to whatever extent they have free will, would all just by sort of nature be in order to fulfill their ultimate purpose. So they're kind of, I guess, dogmatic in a way, and they come into conflict because their purposes are so well. Since they strive so hard to fulfill them, but also like sometimes their purposes seem to be contrary to each other from one Pilar to another.
And it's that conflict that creates more Pilar, though.
Yeah, and so we've basically, I guess, there's one point in the story which maybe this would be a little spoilery, so I'll try to do it in a less spoilery way. But like, because one Pilar seems to choose to go against his own will in order to not destroy or somehow like enslave one of the other Pilar, because they're messing stuff up, he therefore creates another Pilar as sort of a because there's like a higher purpose, and he in his nature couldn't fulfill it, so another Pilar kind of sprang to life in order to fill that gap.
And we're talking instant. I don't even know that this is part of the.
Yeah,
the
I mean,
plot.
it's kind of like all of this would like, it's told as a story because the only way we can explain things is to kind of explain them in time. But this would all be, this is all kind of like a metaphysical, outside of time thing that happened. And so I see it more as like humanity's way of like kind of folktale explaining of how all the gods came to be. And so like it might be that the reality, like the explanation of the mythology is kind of like a dim representation of the reality, because it's a reality that we can't fully explain.
Right. Hence metaphysics, I suppose. I don't know if people's eyes are glazing over too much. If there's any questions that those people in chat would like to ask, feel free, and I'll pose them to Baker as we go on. Especially if you guys are like, what are they talking about? But yeah, and I kind of see, I guess I see the Pilar, the pillar, as gears of a grand cosmic machine, and the temperaments are the hydraulic fluid and all that. It is some deep stuff. Lowbrow.
So I guess we should explain what the temperaments are next. I mean, I think we've probably beaten the Pilar like a dead horse, but or at least for most people. You and I and Doom could probably talk about it for years, but
yeah.
But the temperaments are basically the elemental spirits, or elemental gods, for lack of a better way to put it, and they kind of don't really even have a purpose. I mean, I guess they have free will, but they're almost more like animals. They don't have like self-consciousness. They just do what they do and are kind of beings of chaos. And so all of the way I sort of explained it, I think somewhere on the forums, or maybe it was in Skype, was that the fire kind of elemental god is basically just a being of kind of fiery, like fury. Well, since fury is the name of the element, but like fury and destruction. And so he, on sort of the celestial plane, interacts with all the other elemental gods, and they cause chaos or peace kind of in the element. So everything from like a thunderstorm to a mild rain is some form of interaction between those gods, but on such a kind of like our thunderstorm is microscopic compared to they're sort of everywhere. And they can manifest, or you could maybe like meet one in a more concentrated area, but every kind of the entire principle of fury is related to that fury god. So it's not like a Greek god that's like exists in one place and sort of watches over fire. It's like all fire everywhere is somehow connected, and it's sort of purpose, or I was just saying they don't have a purpose, but it's kind of personality, if you could call it that, is seated in this god of sorts.
Right. Lobros asked a question. He said you guys posted on Kickstarter update about being in kind of a funk lately. Are you guys feeling better about things now? If you want to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, well, just doing streams at all and kind of feeling like people are... well, I know like all of us would love for the game to just be done, and I'm sure our Kickstarter backers would too, but... or probably especially our Kickstarter backers, but it's... I think just hearing that people are... that most people in general would rather have a good game late than have like a horrible game right now was definitely an encouragement. And we should have just... we should have just posted an update sooner. Like there was just a lot of procrastination and just a lot of like being kind of down on ourselves or down on the state of the game, and not feeling like there was anything worthy of showing. And the more time that goes on and you feel like, oh, the game really isn't in a place where we feel like people would want to play it, then it starts to feel like, well, like what do we even show on live streams or whatever. So that's kind of that's, I guess, kind of an explanation of what was going on. But yeah, I mean, I'm feeling better about everything anyway. I've I guess just like between life and everything else, I've been super busy. But
well, I for one am glad to have you guys back.
Well, thanks.
Of course.
Hopefully everyone else is too, even though like the game is still a ways out. But we're making some pretty cool progress. And actually, this could be interesting to talk about. But he's actually not here today because he just works part-time. But our new programming intern contractor guy, Aaron, who you met last week, I actually had him working on an improved version of stunning enemies. So when you hit them and they kind of freeze momentarily and then they kind of become active again. And actually what we ended up doing, partly at his suggestion, actually, was making it more like Dark Souls poise system. And so it's going to be a little bit different, but he just called it poise for the variable in the code because that makes sense to him. And then, basically over time because I started listening to a Dark Souls podcast, like I'd played a little bit of Demon Souls and kind of realized like I don't have the time to get good at this game, so I never played it enough. And then I always like to play games in order, so I felt like I needed to play Demon Souls before I moved to Dark Souls. And that was probably a mistake. So now I'm just playing Dark Souls and enjoying it, but I still kind of suck. I'm only a few hours in and haven't gotten through the Undead Bird yet. But yeah, like basically after listening to the Bonfireside Chat podcast a little bit, I realized like, oh, a lot of the things we're trying to do are actually way more similar to Dark Souls than I had thought. So... Anyway, I thought people might be interested to hear that or hear more about that, and maybe we'll do a development stream at some point talking about that once we get a few more systems kind of lined up.
I think it'd be pretty cool to see. Wake up Kobe and get him on from his code-addled haze.
Yeah.
Although it's good that you guys have someone to help him out, the poor guy. Yeah. All of you guys working hard. Everyone I shouldn't say everyone likes Dark Souls. I think Dark Souls is a really good game. I think it's well built. I enjoyed it. I don't think I'll ever go back to it. Not for anything serious, but...
Oh, you beat it? Sorry, I wasn't keeping up with your streams.
Oh yeah, I beat that a ways. I beat it. I think I beat every boss in the original Dark Souls. I might have missed one or two, but I'm pretty sure I killed all of them. I know I killed Manos. That's for sure. And so does the stream.
That's the guy from the DLC.
Yeah, he's the end boss for the DLC. And he's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I was just listening to the podcast, the Bonfireside chat that talked about that.
Yeah, the lore is pretty cool, especially with Manos and the Abyss.
Yeah, and I guess not that I want to turn this into the Dark Souls cast exactly, but I guess the lore. Well, okay, so I watched the intro cutscene. It was like, oh man, this is like such garbage. Because it's just like anything that doesn't make some logical sense, it's like hard for me to get into. And it was just like, they found souls in the flame, and there were these however many lords, and I'm like, where'd the lords come from? Like, how are they? So they're. Without having some kind of starting point, it was hard for me to kind of lock into that. But listening to the podcast, like, it actually seems like there is a lot of deep lore and a lot of stuff that isn't even explained in the game, that people, it's just conjecture.
And I think that's one of the strengths of Dark Souls with its lore. I kind of don't like the hands-off approach that they use for lore. I guess I like kind of having a storyline interwoven with the game. You can play Dark Souls and never have to worry about the story, and that's fine. That's the style of game it is. But kind of the discover the lore on your own sort of style kind of bugs me, because at least with Dark Souls, I don't think they give you a good thread to pull. I liked the opening cutscene. I thought that was really cool. I was hoping that they would expand upon it more in the game, and they do, but you kind of have to want to spend the time to gather all the weapons and read all the stuff there and go through that whole process. And I'm not a big collector kind of player, so I just felt that I was at a slight disadvantage in discovering the lore. But of course, with the advent of the internet, I don't really have to worry about that, because there are tons of people who will do that for me, and I can watch them and come to my own conclusions having played the game. Which I don't know if they intended, but I kind of felt that Dark Souls 2 dropped the ball even further with the lore. But I played all of that.
Is it set in the same world, kind of?
Yeah, it's set like way into the future.
Okay.
They drop hints about where it kind of lines up, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So Doom says dropping exposition on players is worse. There's ways to do exposition. I mean, every story has to have every written story has to have exposition. I don't see why video games would be any different. I don't see why they're dissimilar. Why they should be dissimilar mediums. Mason asks what the size of your canvas is.
Huge, probably.
Good. That's
14,000 by 10,000 pixels at 512 DPI.
Okay, there you go. But yeah, Dark Souls 2 has you can find shards of the Lord Vessel and stuff like that. And the Lord Souls are back, so it's definitely set in the same world, but the names are different. And as far as I remember, I don't know, the game Dark Souls 2 didn't stick in my mind as much as Dark Souls 1 did. All the AAA games are busy dropping lore on you that certainly don't miss things. Not like Dragon Age. That game handles exposition fairly poorly, I'd say.
Just
although
too much kind of beating you over the head with it.
Yeah, more. I don't know if they know what to how to focus on it, because I think somewhere along the lines the writers wanted it to be this grim, darky kind of Song of Ice and Fire type setting, but the way it's written doesn't appeal that way.
Mm-hmm.
it's all very heroic and it doesn't.
Yeah.
It seems at odds with itself, and I like the lore of Dragon Age. I think the world building is really strong. I think they've like I posted the video for the Qunari and the Qun. I think they've got some really interesting concepts, and I think that they explore them in a tactful manner. I just think that the overall narrative of the series is at odds with itself as the series goes on. It's like Alien, the Alien trilogy, where the first is this surreal kind of horror style movie, and then the second is a horror action movie, and the third is just straight kind of action, and we won't talk about resurrection or anything beyond that point.
Well, what do you think about Prometheus? Because I didn't like it when I saw it in theaters, but then I got the Blu-ray and watched it again and decided I actually rather liked it.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, you probably should do that. We could probably have a whole podcast or something just about. Actually, Kobe really likes the Alien series as well.
I will sit down and see if I can get it then. I'd heard it was really bad. I've seen clips. I know how the overall story goes, but I haven't actually seen it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't really do a lot of movies. I'm pretty bad about keeping up with movies. Mason says, I think it's important to have story aspects vague so the community can be engaged. Too much story can be a bad thing. Certainly, there are things. Sorry for the Skype beeping, guys. There are things that you don't have to elucidate on that can give good conjecture, but kind of like the Pilar and the temperaments, bringing it back a little bit to Delver's Drop. Those are things that don't necessarily have to be expounded on, and I don't necessarily think that they should be expounded on. Though that kind of stuff I think is cool for player conjecture. Like where did the elements come from? Obviously, Baker has an answer to that, and I kind of do just from our talks, but I don't know if there needs to be in Delver's Drop, hey, here's the temperaments and this is where it comes from.
Yeah, and actually what I realized is I've got all this kind of over the last, I think I started this lore arc way before we started Delver's Drop, so it's kind of been on the back burner at least for like the last 4 years or something. So I just kind of from a hobby perspective, for me, I would like to have kind of an origin story for everything and a reason for everything. But the elements, in Delver's Drop, there probably won't really be much interaction or information about the elemental gods. Like they don't really factor very directly into the story. But that made me, especially listening to the Bonfire Side chat, it made me realize, I could actually, even just bringing them in to play a little bit or hinting at their existence can increase people's engagement in the story. Like I think stories, I realize that the successful stories now, like, your Game of Thrones and I'm a big fan of The Wire, like they rely a lot on lots of different characters interacting in very unique ways. It's like, you've got this huge cast, and then like, okay, this chapter, let's throw these two into the mix together and see what happens. And that's to a large degree, and probably just because we know and are connected to so many more people now in contemporary society, that stories are more and more about the interactions between people. Not that they haven't always been, but the cast used to be much smaller, I feel like, in general, across the board. So, feel free to disagree with that, I guess. But what were you saying?
I was going to say, I am going to disagree with you on that. War and Peace would like to talk with you.
I'm not saying it's a hard and fast rule. Let's put it this way. I think in more like mainstream culture, it's gone from like sitcoms with a very small cast of like 5 people to like the big shows being, these Game of Thrones style, like, and maybe that's just kind of the HBO way of doing things, but with just like way more cast members and a much more complex story.
I think you're right. I think there's always been a demographic like that. What are soap operas, I suppose?
Yeah.
Soap operas have a wide range of characters that come in and come out and cycle in and cycle out. I think the nature of television is changing to a point where this kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week in the pre-show, where new media has kind of become each person is its own producer and actor and manager in a way. And I think television has been wise enough to adapt to that kind of medium, whereas I don't think radio has adapted. I think radio is dying as a former communications major. But television has embraced streaming. So you have things like Netflix, you have things like HBO who are seeing the internet and these fandoms, and they're now creating television series not to be watched as a serial, where they used to be, well, this airs every day at Monday at 9. Well, yeah, they still air every day at Monday at 9, but sales have shown that people are more inclined to buy the box DVD or watch them all in one sitting and binge watch them. So I think the story writing has come to a point where, especially since Breaking Bad became so popular and Game of Thrones became so popular, the writing has focused less on episodic content,
right,
and more on an overarching narrative.
Yeah, and that's definitely true.
We might want to reintroduce ourselves. We've got a lot of new people.
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
I actually closed the Twitch stream, so I because my computer runs way faster if I'm not watching and streaming at the same time. So,
yeah,
for any
cool.
new viewers, I'm Ryan of Pixelscopic, working on some art for Delver's Drop. I'm actually working on some sketches for the Cultists, who appear somewhere in the drop and sort of worship Merc, but are also poisoned by it. And with me is Vasae.
I'm Vasae. I'm a streamer and a YouTuber, and I guess mega fan of Delver's Drop. And I'm here to help facilitate chat since Baker doesn't have it up. I guess those are my tasks.
Yeah. Well, and to ask me questions and fill the gaps, because I'm the kind of person who can't drive a car and talk at the same time, as my girlfriend could easily attest. So I will somewhat rely on Vasae to just keep the ball rolling. I can be sketching in the background, and he'll keep us talking, or at least keep himself talking, so we're not silent.
I'm good at talking. It's like my one life skill. I can drive and talk, but my passengers probably don't want me to. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that is who we are.
Is that more because they're trapped with you, or because you drive like a crazy person? Because I'm more likely to be like, I'm driving and my girlfriend's like, that's a stop sign, 10 feet in front of us. Like, oh, sorry, you asked me a question right before that. Don't let me talk and drive. But
a bit of column A and a bit of column B.
Okay.
The person behind Baker, or Ryan, is Nathan Reynolds. He's kind of jack of all trades member of Pixelscopic. Ex great beard holder. I don't know if he can hear me.
I think he just got up to get a drink or something. So.
Okay, yeah. I'm talking with you in real time, but I'm viewing you in a 30 to 40 second delay.
Nothing. He was introducing you, and right as he was saying, and Nathan, you can see Nathan in the background, you got up and left. So.
You want to listen to some smart things regarding TV and video games? Jonathan Blow gave a good talk called, and he didn't say what it was called. And Pause says, if you can't walk and chew bubblegum, you need someone to do the other. You don't want someone to chew bubblegum for you. Yeah, I don't have any personal feelings on Blow. I've heard some of his talks before. I don't always, or actually regularly agree with him, but he definitely is not an idiot when it comes to the video game, even if I don't necessarily agree with his practices. He's no dummy. So, Not like some other devs that I will not name. I think chat can probably fill in those blanks. So, he's a random guy off the street. Did we lose your audio, Baker?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, good. Yeah, I think
I was just concentrating again.
Oh no, no problem. there's a faint static in the background. I think it's just your fans and stuff, and it just disappeared for a second. So it's like, uh-oh. Yeah, it's good. That I don't think you can hear it in chat. I can just hear it over the Skype connection.
Okay.
And it's a good way for me to know what kind of audio quality is going on. But yeah, that's I guess who we are. And last week we had Matthew and Nathan actually in the call, and I'm sure they'll join us again. I hope they'll join us again.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, well, probably before we had to shut down the stream because we had some technical problems. But Matt had to go to school. He's still in college actually, and he was doing a portfolio review to help out some sophomores to get their portfolio ready for application to the program. So, yeah, but we'll have people back on, and Aaron was here last week, sort of. Well, I think he popped in to say hi. He's our new programming intern, and he isn't here today. I think he had a schedule conflict or something. But yeah, he's doing some pretty cool stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to talk more about that soon, or maybe have him more involved on a stream. I think he has like 400 hours in Dark Souls, so he would probably enjoy talking about that with us once I get a little farther and actually have something to say, except like I'm terrible at this game.
There's a good question, or topic, Baker. What is the game that you have the most hours in, not including your own game?
Well, I mean, you're probably not going to see much of anything on my Steam library because, well, for the longest time I had a Mac and couldn't play anything, but I now have a PC at home. But I think of all time, probably Final Fantasy Tactics, I would wager. I had a few save files, and I know one of them capped out at 99 hours and stopped tracking any time past that. So, but yeah, I mean, over the course of my life, I've never, besides basically when I was in like junior high and high school and played video games and did yard work all summer, there's never been a time where I like really had the time to put 200 hours into a video game. So that's actually... It probably, like, I just don't have time to play games like I once did. Basically, since college, I've been kind of a workaholic. So, anyway, long-winded way to answer that question, I suppose. But I'm wanting to, like, I really need to actually start making myself put time into games, like telling my girlfriend, like, hey, tonight's video game night, I need to do research. I'll call it research, so she'll feel better about it. But, no, she actually doesn't mind. She basically said as long as I don't get addicted to World of Warcraft, she doesn't care. But yeah, so I'm trying to get through Dark Souls now very, very slowly.
2Byte DD says, what are you working on today? He is working on cultists and I guess other enemies. What does the to-do list look like? A mountain?
Yeah, I guess for today, I mean, I was struggling a little bit. I kind of like this first guy, but he's a little generic. He just kind of looks like a skull-faced guy in a hood, which I think is okay for the lowest level cultist. But I was trying to come up with some kind of a visual gimmick of sorts. Like, okay, if these, what would a higher level cultist be wearing? So I gave him kind of this Hannibal Lecter style mouth guard sort of thing, and this hood of sorts with kind of notches cut out for eyes. And I was thinking about having the drippy part up here be like basically like black drips over maybe a purple hood as kind of a ritual symbolism for like immersing ourselves in the murk. So it's not actually murk on his hood; it would just be paint, but it's representative of wanting to be immersed in murk. So I'm just kind of exploring, I guess, that sort of idea, trying to come up with something that looks cool and makes sense in the game and in the world.
I think it looks pretty cool. To answer my own question, I guess, or to join in that discussion, I don't even know how many hours I logged into the original StarCraft and Brood War. I still play it when I can with friends over LAN parties. I think I stopped. I haven't played Delver's Drop for any extended period of time, but I think it's at 700 hours now.
Oh man, I didn't realize it was that much. Can I, if I have enough money someday, can I just like, I don't know what I would do for you to repay that, like buy you a pool or something so that you can relax in the pool in your old age.
I'm on your stream. This is good enough for me. I'm a trespasser here. I've insidiously inserted myself into Delver's Drop canon, I guess. That's repayment enough. But I changed my name on the forums to the trespasser. So I was just like, I heard art was happening here. Art is happening here. Classy Dix TV. Yeah, I've latched on to Delver's Drop. So if you had sat me down a year and a half ago and said, yeah, in a year and a half you'll be talking to the devs and you'll have gone to PAX and all this other stuff, it's like, nah, no way.
Yeah,
that's repayment enough for me. Getting to help out is repayment enough. And I think Disgaea I have 600 hours in. I'm the kind of I'm the kind of player when I find a game that I really like to just play that. So, and I think Final Fantasy Tactics, it's hard to chart how much because how many hours I have. Because I played it on the PS1 and then I played it on the PS2, and then I have it for the PSP, and I think combined total I think it's close to 600 hours.
Yeah, I would have played through the entire thing all over again on the PSP. Except that the load times were so bad, and they stretched the screen just slightly to fill up the remaining aspect ratio, and I just can't stand that. Like I couldn't do it. I think it was more the load times, and also the sound effects got clipped on one end or the other, so you would hear a sound that you recognize, but it didn't sound anywhere near as good as the PlayStation version. It would be like a guy screaming like ah, and then it just stops instead of trailing off. Oh man, I really wanted to play the game with the new translation and see what all had changed and just play through it again, but man.
Doom asks why you make the cultists look like they're wearing football helmets.
I do realize it looks kind of like that. This is going to be one of the more militant, kind of like their guards or their warriors. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit like the Hannibal Lecter mask. Which I guess probably needs some kind of a slightly different look, like more like holes in the mask versus the plastic guards of a football helmet. So I might duplicate that and work it a little bit.
You should hang shreds of their hood in the grating.
Like I don't know how the
like they were tearing at it since they're crazy.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy. That's cool.
Live goal filled. Good. All right. Just pulling. They're just looking through. I actually have a non-GH. I don't know what that stands for. Version of PlayStation. Only sent me back $100 back in 1998. That's like $7,000 now with inflation.
Non-greatest hits version.
Oh, I guess. Yeah, I didn't own a PlayStation. I played it at a friend's house. My brother and I had a Sega until the N64 came out, and then we both pulled all our money together and bought one. The PlayStation 2 was the first console I bought with my own, like fully with my own money without help from my brother. And I still have it, and I love it.
Yeah,
a lot of
PlayStation
really
2, that was kind of... I probably put the most hours into the PlayStation or the Game Boy over the course of my life. PlayStation 2, I got one like right as I got into college, partly to watch DVDs, and just like kind of stopped playing games as much. Like I still kind of kept up with stuff, and I would still buy games, but I think that's the point at which I started collecting games and not really playing them because I just didn't have time. I was a crazy student.
Yeah. Oh, in college, and well, in high school, I didn't really get to play a lot of video games. I went to a boarding school, and our time was very truncated. So usually when I went home on the weekends, if I went home on the weekends, I'd kind of seclude myself and play video games unless I had to do other stuff because they really didn't, they didn't assign homework over the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
You could do homework you'd go back on Sunday and you'd have a study hall period and you'd do whatever work you needed to do for Monday if you wanted to, cut the deadline short, which I always did because I was, a procrastinator.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I, and if I was home, I didn't have access to any of my school goods because they stayed at school. So, I'm being told for you to check your phone, Baker. That sounds pretty
yeah. I got a text from Mason asking me to do something along the lines of a specific helmet. I'm not sure. Is that from something or is that something you made, Mason? I know we're now like chatting in multiple media types.
Yeah.
I'm like, so.
I brought a Game & Watch clamshell device a few years back at a yard sale, something like balancing a ball in the air. I own Game & Watch Gallery, and I really like it. They're just little short, silly score attack games, I guess. Which I usually don't like those kind of games, but I don't know. There was an appeal in that. How do you feel about fighting games? I don't know. Yeah, you.
I kind of still do, but really used to love fighting games. That's the one genre I would say that knowing how good some people are, I've always been not so good at them. I vaguely understand most of the concepts. I'm just not that great with the reaction time required, and just the hours of practice you would have to put in to kind of get good at just like reacting to one move with a specific move to counter it, kind of thing.
I really like Guilty Gear.
Yeah, I played a lot of the original. I think it was the original Guilty Gear, or actually probably the second one.
Was it X?
Probably. I think I had it on. Well, yeah, I don't think I had the original on PS1. I had probably X on PS2.
Yeah, it's Guilty Gear X, Guilty Gear XS, XX, and all of its derivatives, Accent Core, and things like that.
But yeah, I've tried to kind of get. I've tried to make sure I have most every version of Street Fighter, and sorry, I'm trying to do a Google image search because I wanted to do something kind of. I thought it would be cool to have some Iron Maiden influence for these cultists, as if they're kind of punishing themselves, or have some kind of I wanted to give this guy like a suit of armor of sorts, but kind of make it look like an Iron Maiden somehow. So.
I thought you meant the band. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, well, I did a Google image search, and I'm like, what is this? Oh, right, the band, not the. Yeah, I had to switch it to Iron Maiden Medieval to get what I was looking for.
People are saying Soul Calibur. I never got into Soul Calibur.
I liked. I played the original Soul Blade, or it was like Soul Blade on. I forget which one is which. It had a different name in the arcade versus console. But I really liked that one a lot. And then I didn't have a Dreamcast right away when the first Soul Calibur came out, so I played a decent bit of Soul Calibur 2, and I liked it. But I never really got into 3D fighting games as much as 2D, and still prefer 2D, I guess. But it's interesting to me that how basically what Soul Calibur does I think Tekken was always like kind of more on a 2D plane. It didn't involve as much sidestepping, or at least not as first compared to the Soul games, like Soul Calibur, Soul Edge. That's what I'm thinking was Soul Edge was in the arcade, Soul Blade on console, I think. But that kind of mentality actually has sort of filtered into games like Demon Souls. It seems like I feel like there's kind of a lineage where some of the ideas developed in like a Soul Calibur ended up in the 3D action games, or probably also a Bayonetta, which is probably even more like Soul Calibur in some ways, with the kind of combos that you do.
Yeah, well, Platinum Games definitely takes its inspiration from the 3D games of the Dreamcast.
Mm-hmm.
I think. I haven't played a lot of Platinum games, but just watching them and seeing how the combo systems work is reminiscent, I think, yeah. Devil May Cry as well.
Yeah, I did not play very much of Bayonetta or Ninja Gaiden. I played them both a little bit. And Devil May Cry I played next to nothing of, but I think I've got the collection, so maybe someday, but...
Yeah, I only played one. I had a friend all of them religiously.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I guess this kind of goes to why I like Let's Plays and watching Let's Plays so much. I was not a big video game player when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. My twin brother was, and I just sit and watch him play video games because we only had one TV in the house, and we only were allowed to play for 2 hours anyway. So we didn't share very well. So we just decided I'd watch. Growing up twins, boys, that's how it is. And then I don't know, around Quest 64, I don't know if you know that game. Really crappy, like almost. I think it was might have been a launch title for the N64. I don't think it was, but it was a 3D RPG exploration kind of game. Maybe chat will know what I'm talking about. It's called Quest 64.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That game really hooked me, and I really liked that. And
you might be the only person in history, though.
I think I might be. Everyone I've ever talked to is like, you liked Quest 64? I don't know if I'd like it now, going back in time and piercing the nostalgia veil. I just remember I had a really good time with it.
Yeah, I never played that one. I was the most anti-N64 person in the world. I thought the graphics looked like the worst garbage imaginable because of the JPEGiness, basically. But also, like, a lot of the colors were really... What's that?
They haven't aged well.
Yeah, like, I would rather go back and play, like, a really old PS1 game, actually. I know that's probably weird to say, but, like, go back and play Metal Gear Solid 1... not one, but the original Metal Gear Solid. Like, I feel like I would rather look at that than any N64 game. And I think also just like the Mario and Zelda, the colors were just like so garish. It kind of, I don't know. I mean, that was before any true kind of lighting or anything, but it's just like everything is so primary and saturated, and that's just how everything on the N64 seemed to be. But also, like, yeah, there were no RPGs. Like, I was playing Suikoden and Final Fantasy Tactics, and
all the RPGs were, and it remains this way. PlayStation has the wealth of RPGs,
mm-hmm.
and it has always been that way. RPGs really didn't kick off until Square. I mean, I guess you had Final Fantasy, kind of, and Dragon Warrior in the old days on Nintendo, but once, and I guess I can't think of many RPGs on the Sega.
Yeah, it was, I think, like on the Genesis and Master System, it was basically Phantasy Star and some other things that people just don't remember anymore.
Yeah, Phantasy Star is definitely the one that sticks out the most in my memory. Golden Axe, I don't know if you'd count Golden Axe as an RPG.
I'd call that a beat 'em up.
Yeah, me too. Um, but yeah, Sony, and definitely when Square got on the Sony platform and uh, left Nintendo behind is when you see the, I guess what you'd call the classical JRPG start to take off.
Yeah, like that's kind of an interesting question. Like, I mean, sure, anything since like Final Fantasy, I think we could pretty safely call like a JRPG. But like the modern-ish JRPG, like what would you say is the first of them? I mean, like, because it really is like pretty different. And I don't know if that would be like a Final Fantasy 6 or 7 was what would have kind of kicked off the more contemporary form of it. I don't know.
Well, I don't know what you'd call a contemporary JRPG. I guess androgynous male leads,
Well, that
convoluted
usually comes with it,
storyline.
but yeah, I'm thinking like because there's definitely a change. I mean, like they became less technical or like more technical in ways that I don't probably appreciate as much. I'd rather fiddle with classes and the Final Fantasy Tactics style of kind of stat management-y stuff, which goes back to like Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 5, and I think I mean that's looking at those games now, that seems like Final Fantasy Tactics seems more like a Western game in some ways than what current JRPGs seem like to me.
I
That's
would
probably
say
like,
7.
hmm,
I would say 7 is the advent of a contemporary JRPG by your definition. Then
yeah. And I guess at this point, I probably haven't really even played enough of them to be like to have opinions about them. But yeah, I mean, like 7, the whole thing with like you can kind of equip whatever materia you want to whomever you want to change their abilities, where it's so like it becomes super free form,
hmm
and you've got these giant summons. I mean, it kind of like it makes. It just didn't seem like there was as much like strategy or thought in the way that you had to put into like a Final Fantasy Tactics.
well, I would say Nippon Ichi took the like, spiritual succession of Final Fantasy Tactics and went with it.
Yeah.
I haven't played a lot of their newest games, but Disgaea 1, Makke Kingdoms, Phantom Brave all kind of have. Phantom Brave is really crunchy. You and I have talked about Phantom Brave before with its physics system, and it's a really deep game. One of the games I've never finished. I still own it. I need to get back
Mm-hmm.
and finish it. But yeah, I don't know. Seven I think isn't as good as people remember it being. It did things that games back then didn't do. It kind of was. I guess it kind of was the advent of a. I don't want to say an epic storyline because I think epic gets thrown around a lot, but you know what I mean. This
Mm-hmm.
grand story. It had more than one disc. The graphics were quote cutting edge unquote. Definitely doesn't look that way anymore, and it captured a zeitgeist and has continued to capture a zeitgeist that I just it stuns me when people are like, yeah, Final Fantasy VII Heavenly Ascent version's coming out in 4 months. I'm like, guys, let's move on. It's done, and it's cool that a new generation is getting to experience the games that I got to experience. But I think I don't know. I think with the advent of the indie scene, we've seen a proliferation of new ideas, and I think it's time that AAA catches up. Maybe that's the indie apologist in me, but
Well,
and I guess
it's if you look at the more recent Final Fantasy games, which I'm playing less and less of. I mean, they are trending toward more action, but also like, well, what in my opinion would be like more and more frivolous plots or characterization. Um, but and yeah, we have to. I feel like we have to kind of separate that from what we were just talking about, which is more like the style of gameplay. But they are so Japanese market centric. Like I don't know if that. Like I guess until they stop selling in Japan, Square and other companies will probably continue to make those like very like what we're calling the contemporary JRPG, which oddly enough for Square is turning into more of an action game.
Yeah,
More
it's
of a Monster
really
Hunter or something.
yeah, it's definitely shedding. It's metamorphosing into something different.
And yeah, I mean, speaking of Monster Hunter, I think because that became so popular, it's just like everything has followed that bandwagon. And not that I'm saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, either one really, but it's interesting that, yeah, I mean, I guess like similar things have happened in the West where there are series that used to be used to be less actiony that have become more actiony. Like you can play Diablo with a controller, right? Like
Yeah, what was it? That was, I don't know. It seemed pretty weird to me.
I thought it was. I played it a bit on Xbox and was actually like I rather liked it. Like oddly enough, I played Diablo 3 a little bit on console and then switched to PC and was like, oh, I didn't realize what all I was missing out on. So I'm surprised that they simplified some of the menus and such so much on console. I mean, I guess it makes sense in a way, but you would think they would figure out a way to make those kind of menus work on console instead of just kind of trimming details out.
Yeah, 2-bit Ed asks, has Monster Hunter been very popular in the U.S.? It's pretty popular.
Yeah,
I don't know
really
if it's
how popular, but I definitely not as popular as in Japan, I'm sure.
This latest one, Monster Hunter 4, is getting really a lot more popularity than the other ones did. But yeah, it's still nothing compared to the reception in Japan, like Trev Newt said. To kind of bring us back to Delver's Drop, I guess would you classify Zelda as an RPG?
Oh man. Well, okay. So if we're
I'm going to kick over that barrel of snakes.
Yeah, if we're going to define RPGs, I mean, well, like I've listened to the Retronauts, or maybe it was Active Time Babble, which might as well be considered part of Retronauts, kind of, on the old EGM network. But they had a whole episode that was all about what is an RPG, and I would agree with some of the things they said, I think, but genre distinctions are hard in general, just because and they said this on that episode. It's like because games used to be much simpler, it was easier to define what genre they fell into. Like, you couldn't really have a platforming game with RPG elements so much back in the day. Like, you could maybe a little bit, but not to the degree that we can now. Like, we can much more easily develop more complex games, and the PCs or game systems can support that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, look at Assassin's Creed. It's got a ton of RPG elements, but it's an action game, and but it's also like an open world game. So it blended all these ideas from different genres. Like, would I call it an RPG? Like, not really. But then, what is an RPG? And I think really the tag system that you see on Steam, which does kind of mix up, I guess, like a narrative genre or setting and gameplay elements and other kind of identifiers like indie, which isn't a genre. It's just a, I don't even know what you would call that. Like, it just where does it originate from, kind of thing. But
it's an archetype. It's an indie is an archetype. It's not it transcends genre.
Yeah, but indie has to do with, I think, who and how makes it, or how it's made, right? Like,
I think that's a primary part to it. Sure.
Yeah. So if we look at the term RPG in a certain way, like, we really, I think, have to boil it down to, like, at this point, I would say like the term RPG is not so much a genre as an identifier of certain mechanics within games. And you could sit down and make like a very strict RPG, and it would probably be turn-based, have a lot of stats, have characters that you can customize or upgrade or equip things to. Like I think that fundamentally is, what I would define, like, if you're going to sit down and make an RPG that couldn't be called anything else, that's what you would make. Like a pure RPG would be turn-based, multiple characters, equip them, this, that, and the other. So if you then ask me, like, well, would you consider Zelda an RPG? I guess I would say kind of. I mean, I would call it an action RPG. Like, that's how we define Delvers, and we're trying to add more RPG to that formula. But then a lot of people, I guess, like, without me realizing it, years ago, started calling Diablo an action RPG, which I actually don't like. Because it's not, I mean, it's real time. I would prefer to call that a real time RPG, but Diablo 3 is much more of an action game. It's more fast paced, like a little more immediate. Whereas, the fact that you can play it with a controller, and I don't know that you really could have so much with the older games, the older Diablos. Probably someone could figure out a way to adapt it, but. Yeah, but the fact that you're pointing and clicking and your character moves there without you having direct control over exactly how they move, you're not actually pressing a button to control their every step, that I would call a real-time RPG or a real-time game versus an action game. Or like, you click and hold down the button and they keep swinging their sword versus you pressing a button multiple times and that causes the sword swings.
Right.
So to that extent, I would say Zelda is definitely an action game, and it has a few RPG elements like upgrading your hearts and things like that. But I think for the longest time, for me and for a lot of people, RPG kind of had something more to do with just the setting and the feel of a game, as opposed to the mechanics. Which the more I've designed games, the more I've thought about. Just what that really means, what RPG would mean mechanically, or what I want to incorporate mechanically from RPGs of all sorts into my games.
Right, and you answered the next, the next question is, what would you classify Delvers Drop in? And you say action RPG with roguelike tendencies.
Yeah, and I honestly, like, over time, I feel like we've realized that what we wanted to do roguelike wise is just so hard to pull off that we're probably going to be somewhat we're not going to remove or like go back on any of the Kickstarter promises, but we've kind of realized that the level of randomization we wanted actually isn't very fun to play. And we never, I don't think we ever promised or never really planned on making every room completely procedurally generated, like they were hand designed with some randomized elements. But we've realized, like, even the way we were doing that didn't completely work, and so we're probably going to be doing more hand designed pieces that kind of get fit together randomly in some kind of meta structure. And then the other side of the roguelike coin is the whole permadeath thing, which we are still going to do, like, sort of a type of permadeath. I think one way in which our game is, I was going to say unique, but I guess Rogue Legacy did something similar. Is like every time you play a new character, it's considered to be like a new person. Like the previous person you were playing as is dead. It's not like the rogue magically gets resurrected and you're playing the same rogue over and over. No, it's like if you're playing and your rogue dies, and then you start another rogue, like that's a different human being with a different name. And there are going to be some kind of mild story ramifications around that. I mean, we're not, but just for like ease of play, unless we probably will enable some kind of hardcore mode, where you have to start over every time. But that actually removes a few of the more interesting gameplay elements. So I think we will probably encourage people actually not to play hardcore mode. And if they want to be hardcore about it, just don't. We're going to have a respec option, and you could basically just, like, every time you start a new character, just like cancel out all their previous abilities, and so to speak, like start at level 1 in terms of skill and upgrades. So you can basically keep, or we may force all players to kind of keep their progress in the meta sense, with like things they've seen in the story and so on, but allow them to kind of zero the character out so they don't feel like they feel like they've got to start from scratch skill wise.
Right. So on the, I guess, the randomization level, one thing, as someone who has put so much time in, especially with the latest the pit generation, is I don't know how much criticism can go into that. Just that part of the last generation seems to not gel with the kind of speediness that you want in the game.
Yeah. Well, so I guess speaking to that, the more I've played our game, the more I realize like it's not. Well, there are several ways in which it's not fun for very long, and I do still want a very fast-paced game, but I also want strategic combat to some degree. And I think those two do run contrary to each other to some degree. Like, you can be more strategic if you slow the characters down a little bit and slow the moveset down slightly. So we might go back and slow everything down just a tad in order to develop a more, basically make your combos, well, when we get combos working, but make that actually matter so that you have to use combos or have to use a fire weapon then an ice weapon. Where right now I feel like the game is like pretty heavy kind of on the button mashing side of things. So all of that to say, the game may slow down in pace just a tiny bit. We're talking like 5 to 10% slower. But then, so speaking about pits, one of the goals in adding more pits was actually, well, because it's pretty boring to walk around the rooms, it's interesting that like the faster you can move, the less rooms actually seem to matter, and the more things you can destroy in a room, they matter even less still. So what I wanted to do is create some kind of permanent obstacles that required a certain degree of your kind of reaction time and skill to avoid. And so obviously if and when we add more of the kind of permanent indestructible turrets into the game, then you'll have to avoid those. But we're actually working on making the we used to have kind of a backdash or side dodge function, and so you would have a forward shield dash or a backwards little hop. And so what we're actually going to do is change the dash function, so if you tap the dash button, you can do like a very short, quick hop in any direction, or if you hold it down, you kind of charge up for a moment and then do almost more like a Pegasus boot style dash forward. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. We still need to, we've actually got to fix something or change something in the physics system to get that to work. But the goal would be that forward dash can be used to jump over pits. So sorry to talk in a giant circle and then finally answer your question, as Matt likes to point out that I tend to do. But yeah, so basically the pits will be, as long as it's only one pit in width, those will become a circumventable obstacle, and you can still move through the room pretty quickly and just like jump to get over them. And I think that also gives like a nice kind of second benefit to dashing.
Yeah, I guess the main thing, the rooms need to be built around the static objects, not the rooms being built and then the static items being put in a random sort of way.
Yeah, there were a lot that there were some of the randomized properties that weren't interacting well with each other, where we would build layers that were supposed to be able to spawn together and create an interesting room, but sometimes objects would cancel each other out, and then it would just look like they were just sprinkled at random.
Yeah.
And so that's something else we need to fix, partly on the design side, but partly like on the just kind of structure and code, so that there were some bugs at one point where things were canceling each other out too much. Where instead of basically if two walls tried to spawn over each other, it should have removed one and only spawned one, but I think sometimes it was spawning neither as well.
And then there's also some overlap where they'd spawn both. Doom says don't make it a grind fest like Rogue Legacy. Today seems to be taking shots at Rogue Legacy Day. I guess I started that, and I don't apologize for it because I have deep-seated issues with that game.
Well, I started trying to play it, and I was like, wait, am I in the wrong area? Because it got instantly really hard, but not in a good kind of hard. It was like, well, there's a ghost shooting fireballs at me from a weird 45-degree angle, and I can't get anywhere near it to attack it. Did I just warp to like level 10, and should I have other abilities that I don't have now? Like that's literally what I thought, but I don't know where else I could have gone. Like, I don't think you can go the wrong way. I think that's just the game. And I just wasn't expecting it to be so funky right away. Like, I kind of don't like that mentality of, like, well, we're just going to, like, slap these things together and not, like, not that I have to be, like, you know, handheld in a game. But, you know,
No, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
You know, I don't think that I think they just let the randomization take over and didn't really kind of stair step the difficulty or give much thought to things like the geometry of enemy attacks.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a main issue with that game. I don't want to turn this into the shit on Rogue Legacy hour or anything like that.
But I think as long as, like, I think we're being critical of any and all games, including our own.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fine with. I mean, I think it is a really cool game, but you know, I'm fine with us critiquing.
Okay, well, I think especially I guess we can say contemporary roguelikes, in the same sense that we were talking about contemporary JRPGs and RPGs in general. I think that there is a over-reliance, and I see this in games like Wizard's Lizard, which is another game I have deep-seated issues with, where the RNG is the only thing that matters because, hey, if the RNG handles everything, it just makes it so that the game is cheaper to make. And that's understandable because games obviously take a lot of money to make and they take a lot of time to make, but if your approach, and this is, I think, something in your guys' favor where you do want to make a good game and you are spending the time on making a good game, whereas I think a lot of the contemporaries in your field, and they are contemporaries in your field, a lot of these games were also kickstarted, so there's overlap there as well. They just said, okay, this is taking too much time, this is taking too much money, so we're not going to take the time to mesh everything together to a point where it works in a cohesive form. And Rogue's Legacy and Wizard's Lizard are actually really good points on the spectrum where Wizard's Lizard tried to embrace a more Zelda-esque style of gameplay like Isaac, but they tried to take it to the upgrading items, but everything that you got was out of a really small pool, and gameplay was really slow to kind of give you this tactical thing, but at the same time they spawned in random pits and random spikes, and it was all done in a really kind of cookie cutter, cut and paste kind of way, and it was very clear there was no will behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whereas
that's the kind of stuff that Kobe really hates too, like just like pure randomization, where the code, like, I mean, you can make something as random as you want, but yeah, like spawning a random item inside of a pit, or even just like right beside a pit so that it can fall in there, that's just kind of like not taking the time and attention to prevent that. I mean, so you could program a game to be like completely 100% random, and then program some rules to tell it like, okay, but don't do this. Don't spawn items next to pits. You can put it anywhere else, just not, like, so it's, yeah, I mean, it requires another whole pass of programming to prevent the bad cases while allowing the good ones.
Doom says, sorry to interrupt, just some chat stuff. Baker, these cultists are amazing, Doom says. 2-Bit Ed has the jet, thanks for coming, hope you join us again. And Mason says, RNG helps to make a game slightly different on every playthrough. Yeah, that's true. There's a limit to what the RNG can accomplish, though. Sorry for...
It's, I mean, the whole RNG thing, it's like, yeah, it's a really powerful tool, but, like, I mean, like, let's just say poker poker is random in that the cards are shuffled every time, and so it's got like ideally you have a perfect shuffler who can like mix the cards up completely. So every game's different, but poker's interesting because it has people's brains behind it.
Right.
So if your game is basically like random, and we shuffled the cards and just threw all the cards on the table, have fun, then that's it's not very fun. It is like you're having to pick those cards up then. And the work is on you, when really the developer should be kind of picking the cards up and dealing them in the appropriate manner, and making sure that there are other players or other AI players to kind of make the game fun.
Right. I don't know if you remember this, but when we were having dinner with the Darkest Dungeon guys, and I had mentioned that Isaac's RNG was just Flash RNG, and it needed to be improved, and Chris was like, "Well, it's a random system. How can you improve a random system?" And I remember having to discuss, well, there's no way you can actually code a perfectly random system in a computer, and it has to fit parameters. And
actually, Kobe could probably say some interesting things about that, and like how our seeds are going to work, and just the randomization in general in Delvers.
We definitely have to get Kobe in on one of these days soon. I say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He will hopefully do one soon. Probably on Saturdays might be the day to do that. We'll see. I'll chat with him and see if we can get something scheduled.
Okay. I'd love to join you guys on that too.
Yeah.
If you'll have me. But yeah, and I think not to shit on the Darkest Dungeon guys, they've been nothing but wonderful to me, and I really like the game that they've made. I have some problems with the RNG in their game, and kind of the difficulty curve that they've put in the game, but that's the way that they made the game. But I think more that question was indicative of a broader issue within the game-making community. Especially for people who want to make roguelikes.
Yeah, I think I think some games, and I don't actually know in particular of any specific ones, nor would I necessarily want to name them, but I think there is a tendency, especially if you're a small team making a game, you can get really good at your own game to the point that you don't sort of notice the downfalls in like something like completely just bad randomization. You've like done it so much that you kind of have like the Stockholm syndrome of just like being used to that. And I mean, I would even have some complaints about Dark Souls kind of in that regard, that it's just like, it's a game for like made for hardcore players, and you've got to really, really suffer and like teach yourself how certain things work before you even like understand the fun or the strategy. And I'm not saying that Delvers is any different. I mean, Delvers has no tutorial or anything right now, but
I don't think. I mean, it's hard for me to decouple the amount of time I have in the game, but I didn't have any problems picking up the game and understanding the basics. Obviously, I was terrible at it. Probably still am. I've only no damage run the rogue and the sorcerer. Haven't managed to do that with Gladiator, Beastkeeper, or Assassin, and probably never will with the Assassin, because she's a tough gal. Although I really like the gameplay of the Assassin. I think what will hopefully it attract people, if I can kind of be a bit of a salesman here for a minute, is that each character does have its own way of playing, and I think you guys have really kind of hit upon that mindset where each class is different. And I think I know I always see people say, oh, well, this character class is too slidey, this character class is too heavy, he moves too sluggishly. I mean, I understand that those are all valid criticisms, but if you start doing away with that sort of thing, all the character classes will play exactly the same, and then people will complain about, oh, well, there's no difference between the classes except the weapons we can pick. So I would say that's definitely a a pitfall not to fall in.
So, and well, that reminds me of something kind of interesting to discuss and pull some opinions on, and then probably in the next 5 or 10 minutes or so, we should probably call it good since it's close to 5 o'clock on a Friday. But so there's a certain degree to which we will lean on the not done yet, but the upgrade system, the kind of perks and skills that you can upgrade as the characters level up to make them more unique. So there's that, there's your primary weapon, and there's also the special abilities, which are not in the game yet. So there are several things not in there, and several parts of the kind of physics and movement system that I'm planning to tweak to make it so that characters can feel even more distinct than they already do, but also hopefully like clean up for instance, the sorcerer, so he's a little bit easier to control. I still want him to feel distinct, but I think we could improve his control slightly so he's just not frustrating for the average player. I'm okay with actually having one character class, though. Probably not the sorcerer. I might make it like the Harlequin or something that is literally like supposed to be frustrating to play, but is an expert level character. You can still play the game as them. It's just like really hard to learn, and for the masochists. But I don't want to have more than one character that's like that, and I think it probably shouldn't be part of that like starting set of rogue, sorcerer, gladiator. So I don't know. Maybe we make the sorcerer unlock later. Like if the sorcerer does remain fairly difficult, just have him unlock later, and then people can get used to the other characters and then only use him if they unlock him and then like him. But yeah, so I guess the other thing I'm wondering about is like since we could actually improve the handling or the physics of a character as you level them up. Like if you wanted to put points into the sorcerer's traction to make him corner better, you could do that. But I also, it's really easy as a game designer to be kind of evil and be like, well, let's make the sorcerer control horribly at first so that people want to kind of grind their way through the leveling system to make him better. So but I kind of hate that mentality of like, okay, let's make it bad so that people. It's the Farmville approach. I mean, Farmville made money, made millions of dollars off of. Let's make the game frustrating and give you limited resources or whatever, make it hard, and you pay money, or in our case, pay time and experience points to make it easier on yourself.
Well, I would say that's the very thing we were criticizing Rogue Legacy not 10 minutes ago for doing as well. So I would definitely say that's probably is something to avoid. Yeah. As a player, I guess I'm in a nebulous position of what that even means at this point. But
means for us, you mean?
What
means for our game specifically?
Yeah. I mean, I still see myself as primarily a player of the game. I would prefer to see the rogue be the only character you start off with. And
yeah, I would be okay with that being at least like you start off because I don't want to. I want to tutorialize a bit, but I don't want it to beat people over the head and make them go through hours of tutorial to get started, especially if you're playing the game for a second time. I am okay with having the rogue be the first one available, and maybe like you can go through the tutorial with her, but then like if you basically the first time you die or something like that, then the second character unlocks. Like I'm actually okay with some kind of rollout like that, just especially because people are overwhelmed by choice. If you throw them into, like I've seen so many people at PAX be confused in our jail, and it could be improved with some text or some other hints. But yeah, I think just like limiting people's choices, like kind of giving them one choice at first and then expanding those choices is a fine approach and usually a good approach.
That's what Nuclear Throne does. You start off with fish, you die, you unlock a character, and then
it's like a tutorial level, right? Something like that, or I can't remember now how it started.
A little bit. I don't really think Nuclear Throne has a lot of tutorialization. I think it's pretty much pick up the game and play. But yeah, I would say the first level with fish. The fish is your baseline. Rogue is the baseline for Delver's Drop. I forget who you unlock when you die for the first time. But, different ways of dying, different locations where you reach how many times you die, things like that. Same with Isaac. You start off with Isaac. I think you only start off with Isaac. It's been so long since I've played Rebirth from the beginning, and then don't get hit for 2 floors, unlock Samson. And that's for Rebirth. I think it's different in original, but things like that. So I think having one starting character and then making the character classes unlock not be so, well, find X item in Y room and align the 7 stones of power and then do a jig. I think that's I think that's a better way of doing things in a roguelike, where, especially in a roguelike where you're intended to fail. Mm-hmm. I think that doesn't, and then if you want a super special character like Nuclear Throne has the horror, where you have to fulfill certain parameters, but they're an expert class, so I guess the final unlock character that you get can have those sorts of things. Mason asks, are there holidays in the drop?
I haven't really thought about holidays.
Well, they have your birthday, and then every year they celebrate not dying in the drop.
That is one thing. I haven't even thought about that in the lore, because I haven't, there's not much in terms of religion that I've kind of really gotten into. I guess there are some ideas for the different sects and their religions or beliefs and so on, but I do want to add a little more story whenever a new class is unlocked. I would kind of like some dialogue from the jailer or something like that. So even if you don't have to solve a puzzle to kind of bring them into the game, I would like a little more story of some sort.
Mm-hmm. I think Isaac's character select screen is really good. I don't know if you have a good visualization, but all the characters are kind of like in chains and kind of silhouetted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then as you unlock them, they become apparent, and especially with the jail, each character class could be in their cell, but there's no lights in those, and each time a character unlocks, the jailer actually goes up and lights a torch over the jail cell and says, "Hey, these are your crimes," something like that.
And I just had an interesting idea, and this might be a little bit spoilery, but I will probably forget it if I don't say it right now and have you remind me later, Vas. But that there are going to be some kind of guild rooms in the game that you can find that's kind of like, if we have the ability to store items, like kind of stash them for later, they will be in the guild room. You can probably respec your character to some degree. It's kind of like the resting point within a dungeon, but they are randomly placed and not in every single level. So, and these are kind of like, used to be the ancient guild hall where the delvers would meet and have delver business or whatever. But I thought it might actually be pretty interesting to make the jail feel more like those delver halls, as if each of what are now jail cells were kind of, the cells were built around what was like, this was the table for the rogues, or this was, there's like a rogue symbol kind of on the wall or something like that to show that this is like where rogues are supposed to be, but they've converted this whole thing into a jail. And so the places that are empty, like they haven't captured any musketeers yet, there's like a place set aside for them, and because this used to be a guild hall.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, so that could also, like, it could both hint at the characters, but also give a reason why they aren't there yet, because they just literally haven't been captured at that point in kind of your story.
Mm-hmm. Right. That makes sense. I shouldn't. Never mind. I was going to say something, but it's definitely spoilery.
Okay, we can chat later.
Well, it's nothing that it's nothing too expounding. It's just timeline stuff. Since I've seen it. So yeah, and on the holidays, people are saying things like Delver's Mass, and that they're saying that you're drawing a pope, the Delver Pope.
Yeah, I'm probably going to change it to some degree, but I'm still trying to make these, the cultists and acolytes of the Merc, and was trying to come up with different hats, and so yeah, that one is kind of like a Pope hat, but
I'd like to see
I don't know.
Mercromancer.
I feel like I've been pretty unsuccessful today. Like I haven't gotten a lot done. Well, we were also talking quite a bit, but I feel like the
Yeah.
ideas aren't totally gelling. Some of them are pretty cool. I like this. I like the first guy, just like the basic skeleton dude, quite a bit, and I kind
I
of like this guy, but he needs something different. But that would be basically like the guards to the other ones. And then I was working on just other levels of cultists or cult priests or something, because I don't want to refer too much to like, well, this guy kind of looks like he's got a KKK hood, which I would prefer not to get into, so I might have to make
yeah.
some change. But or like the Pope hat, like I was trying to cycle through in my mind like what kind of hats would look vaguely religious, but creepy. So
I really like tuxedo mask that you've got going on there.
yeah.
I know the chat was talking about the top hat. They were freaking out about the top hat.
Yeah,
I really like.
I thought it could
design.
be kind of interesting if there was like what used to be nobles of some sort that had these top hats but became cultists. I mean, the only element out of all of this that I really do kind of like is the dripping, what would probably be black or like dark tarry looking wax.
Mm-hmm.
That they're wanting to like immerse themselves in this blackness, and so they just let it like drip all over them. It's kind of like weird and gross without being too like disturbing or anything, and it's a nice metaphor for the Merc consuming everything by just like eventually, like I should probably make like the ultimate guy should probably just be like he's got this little candle up here, but he's just like pools of wax kind of like dripping over.
Yeah.
So this is like their ultimate priest. He's just like a wax being, or like just coated in wax.
Yeah, I really like the wax strip that you've got going on.
So we'll see. I sometimes it's actually kind of hard for me to like do this and talk, but like do it on a stream, because sometimes I like I've just been sketching ideas because I can't really like focus just on that. So it's, on streams, it's usually easier for me to something that do something that I've already thought completely through and just like sit down and execute it. Or like if it's a magic effect, like I've already got the flame drawn, so animating the flame, I can kind of do that without thinking too much. But like, yeah, this requires a little more thought. But actually, like, what we should probably do is just brainstorm more like what each of these dudes should be in the future. On future streams, like instead of me just kind of drawing, like throw out some ideas or see if anyone else has any ideas. Because I don't really need this many cultists. I was just trying to generate some cool looking themes. But anyway, we should probably wrap up for today.
Sure.
Are there any other questions or anything that anyone might have before we sign off?
Just got to give them a couple seconds to. You want to? Would you do me a big nerdy favor and do a quick sketch for a more recent Mercromancer?
Oh,
while
geez.
we wait.
Well, I mean, I don't know if they're actually going to be Mercromancers in the game, but like,
dang.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't. Was there a sketch of one from way back when? Because I don't actually remember what it looks like now, unless it just looks like a witch. But I thought the witch was something separate.
Let me see if I have that my big old
a
file.
vague recollection. Yeah, I'll find it, I think. Or
okay.
Can you send it to me over Skype?
Yeah, I can send it to you over Skype real fast.
You have it if you have it at hand.
I sure do. I have a big file of old. Does that want to work? I have a big file of photos and images, so that when there it goes. When we do the wiki, I will be able to post that kind of stuff. With your permission, of course.
Can I access this? Yeah.
What is 42? That's the answer to the universe and everything.
What's that referring to?
That is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Mason asked, "What is 42?" And that is the I forget the full title because it's been so long since I've read that, but it's Life, Universe, and everything, I think. Have you read The Hitchhiker's Guide?
I have not. I watched the movie, which I'm sure is a very different thing. But yeah, so this is, I guess, this was so old, like I barely remember this. But actually, I feel like that does kind of match up with some of my more recent ideas about what mercromancy would be, which actually gets closer to like vampirism in some ways. So I should probably do a sketch of this at some point, even if it doesn't directly relate to Delver's Drop. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We probably ought to have a mercromancer somewhere in the game. I just don't know how they would really fit in with the story just yet. I have a couple ideas, but I guess I just need to define more clearly what they are and what is mercromancy and what isn't. Because I guess one of the characters I was working on would probably do some mercromantic things, but wouldn't look like that. So I just need to figure that out first.
Yeah, I didn't know that they weren't going to be in the game. Sorry for asking for something like that.
Oh no, that's fine. I mean, we've sort of talked about, like, of course we would love to do expansions and make a lot more classes, and so maybe at some point a mercromancer could be a class, even though they technically aren't part of the 12 kind of sacred guilds. But
right.
Who knows?
All right, I don't see any questions. Other than what is 42. So if you want to wrap it up, we should work on an outro and an intro at some point.
So
not like an animated outro, just like something. I'll type something up and put it in the drive file. Are there babies in the drop? Mason asked.
No, only dead babies.
Yeah, I'd say I don't think babies would last very long in the drop. Doom says no, like nothing else. No. Full stop. Drop the mic. No. But yeah. So this has been an art stream, and I guess kind of a podcasty style
exploration of random things.
Yeah. So we'll be back hopefully next Friday. I don't know what your plans are, Baker, but
I'm planning on doing it every Friday unless we give notice otherwise on Twitter or wherever. So,
and I'll say this, especially as more recent versions of the game come out, even if there isn't a stream, and this is kind of me plugging myself, so I hope you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
I will do a stream on Fridays, and it will just be Delver's Drop stuff as we near new releases and stuff.
Okay.
And if you guys can, I mean, I'm sure you guys will give me more heads up than a couple days, but I'll probably ask you, Baker, for some stuff that I can talk about, and I'll just kind of do it solo.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good to me.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you all for showing up. Looks like 11 of you. We just got like 2 more viewers in the last 5 seconds. Sorry, everyone.
We had 20 at peak.
Oh, nice. So we'll thank all 20 of you or so for showing up, and we will catch you again next week. I'm Ryan Baker with Pixelscopic doing art for Delver's Drop. You can see the link if you want to check out the website or possibly buy the game. You can actually play a very early rough version right now if you go to delversdrop.com/buy. So, yeah, thank you all for showing up, and thank you, Vasae, for moderating /hosting /making sure I talk about things.
Absolutely. Happy to do it, and I guess I'll sign out as well. I'm Vasae. Or Kyle. I'll probably just stick with Kyle for these streams. I'm a YouTuber at 830 to Awesome. I stream at Vasae. You can just click on my name, and I guess I'm your host. Kind of, not to take that title as.
We should probably make you non-invisible at some point.
Yeah,
we're figuring this out as we go. So we'll chat about that.
Okay.
So yes, our invisible host, Vasae, we are now vanishing into the ether, all of us. So we'll see you again next week.
Slowly drifting.